get a nice, rich sound.
Yeah.
The closer you get, the better it sounds.
Get that radio sound.
Oh, yeah.
Radio guys.
94.5 The Buzz. What's
Yeah.
going on, guys?
All right, Jay. We're waiting for Jay. So we're gonna do the bumper, and then I have to do a quick. We're live streaming for the first time today. We've done the podcast in September, so we're not in a groove yet, but we'll be eventually.
So this is live now?
In about a couple seconds, it will be.
So no swearing.
No, you can
Oh,
swear.
no, you can swear.
You can swear. Okay, good.
Shit, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that might work. Cool little mic stand, though.
We should win a little taller.
Yeah, or the chair a little shorter.
I think you can make it shorter.
Yeah, you can make the chair shorter.
On the right-hand side.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah,
Going right
we're
on
ready.
it.
Stand by, guys.
It's like a rock and roll band.
So we're excited
He's so ready.
That's good too. Jeez, you guys are good
Are
broadcasters.
you gonna do the bumper?
I did radio for 8 years.
Oh, didn't
Hey,
show
look
up.
at me.
See how good we are in tune. So we're back on the Recipe Podcast. Thank you all for tuning in. We'd like to do a quick thank you to our sponsors, Aceway Ricardo. Aceway, and the owner of the company is Ricardo. He's an amazing guy with an amazing customer service, and we're so proud to be affiliated with him. And I've been using Aceway for many, many years. If you want to have your kitchens clean, he's a guy to go to. Check him out. And also office buildings or whatever else, any kind of problems you're having, go ahead and give him a call. And that's Aceway, and we will find those links on our website, and the Bob will make that happen. And also Dunkin' Coffee. We're drinking Dunkin' Coffee this morning, and some of the best coffee in the country. And Mills Dunkin', he'll grind any kind of coffee you like, any kind of strength you like. He'll take care of you. That's Dunkin', Duncan. And special guy, special friend. He'll come in with his boots and belt buckle and service your equipment himself. And also his boys working with him now too. So special guy, special company, and great customer service. So that's our sponsors, and we are in a new studio, and so we're now live. We're live streaming, and we have our first guest in house. You guys excited? Everybody excited?
Yep.
Yeah.
Mr. Robert Del Grande. Nice to see you, brother.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Yeah, man.
Great to have a cup of Dunkin' coffee in
There
my
you
hand,
go,
which
right,
is, you
yeah.
know, it's,
I know you use Dunkin'.
I for years and years and years.
Yeah, good for you,
An old
man.
buddy of mine now. He opened my eyes to great coffee, and he allows me to like make my own blends, come over there, check the roasters out, and
Yeah.
it's pretty phenomenal.
Yeah, I mean I know you're a connoisseur of great wines and also coffee, so I bet you have a lot of fun playing with that kind of blends. And
You know, good coffee's a lot like wine. I mean, it's interesting. You can take the single varietal approach, which Duncan has a ton of them, and then I got into blending them, which is really interesting, which makes you take out a map. You have to learn geography. Like, where exactly is Ethiopia? Let me look that up for a second.
Well, that's cool, man. We're going to do a little bit of housekeeping real quick, but proud to have you not only in studio, but our first guest live streaming in studio. So you're the best guy to
I
have
will be
in.
careful what I say.
Yeah,
then.
no, not at all. Please don't.
Just let loose, man.
Yeah, so we are the Recipe Podcast, Celebrity Secrets to a Successful Life, and this is our new segment that we're having with Houston Hospitality, and we're not quite sure what to name it yet. So if you have any ideas, listeners, we're open for ideas about Houston Hospitality or anything in Houston or Texas, for that matter. Anything to
I
do
love this. A show in search of a name. That's a
Yeah, I mean,
like
we're
it.
backing
That's
into
very
it, Chef. You know,
very
we're-
artistic.
Yeah,
It's very very literary.
Well,
there.
we're creative. You know, we like to have the creative minds. You know, Michigan State University, when they first built the new campus, they didn't put any sidewalks in. Did you know this?
I may have heard this story.
Yeah. You're a good study. So they didn't put any sidewalks. I don't know if I told you this before, and so they decided not to put them in until after the first year, because human nature is to go to point A to point B the quickest possible. So they're just going to wait to see where the beaten path is, and then they're going to put in all the sidewalks in the year later. So is that cool or what?
That is cool.
So that's kind of what we're doing here. At
I
the
think it
Reci-
stops those deer paths through the lawn, right? I think that's. I think that was the theory anyway.
Yeah, so that's what the Recipe Podcast is doing, and we're waiting for to see what that beaten path is, really, and that's kind of what we're doing. So
I think pave it as we go.
yeah,
There
you know
we
what I
go.
mean. You know what I mean. Just kind of just take it easy, and don't rush into things. And we're proud to be in the studio now. We got in last month. We've been doing the Recipe Podcast in September. We're coming up on our anniversary, Phil.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's kind of fun, and we've grown into just starting this month into the live broadcast. So we're going to be live streaming on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube. So listeners out there, longtime listeners, you're the smartest people on the planet. Thank you for tuning in, and we are changing our show as we go. So have patience with us. And again, thank you to Aceway and Dunkin' Coffee and Bobbitt. I know you don't have a mic in front of you, but she is our producer, and she makes things happen. And we have shows on Helium Radio now, and Helium is on Mondays and Thursdays at 4:30. So there's 2 shows on Helium on Mondays and 1 show on Thursday, a Throwback Thursday. And then this show is we're still feeling it out, but we're thinking we're going to have 2 of these live streams a week on Saturday mornings. So we start around 8:30, the first live stream, and then around 9:30 and 9:15, 9:30 for the second live stream. So if you want to see what Robert Del Grande looks like, you can go look up the live stream.
At this time in the morning.
Yes.
You know.
So
I like to think I improve throughout the day. You know.
So, Chef, such a pleasure to have you in studio, man. And we've been friends, I guess, just about 19 years since I've been in Houston.
I mean, long time. I can't remember.
Yeah, so I'm proud to be able to call you my friend, so there's so much to talk to you about. I mean, you are one of the pioneer chefs, one of the first celebrity chefs to really kind of put Houston on the map. I think that's fair to say. Would you say that's fair to say?
Well, I know in due respect to all the other people that were here first, I think everyone sort of was working towards that goal. But I think when I got started, I guess, the media didn't pay much attention to Houston, and that was
Right.
kind of the trick to figure out, well, they wouldn't pay attention to Houston. There's a lot going on here. But, you can be a great city and be invisible, so the media somehow plays into it. And so that was kind of the revolution. All the food magazines and stuff at the time, it just happened to hit it right, I'm always trying to decide between skill and luck, and I keep voting for luck because it works,
I don't know about that, Chef. But well, let's back up just a little bit because you came from California. You came from the West Coast.
Yep.
How many years ago?
Let's see, I came in 1981, so do you have a calculator?
I
can,
don't.
work
Bob,
on that, but
help us
yeah,
out. In
we'll have to-
1981. That's like
37?
Probably
It's like
37, growing there.
50
yeah.
years ago, something
Yeah,
like that.
37.
Yeah,
Yeah, she's
yeah.
getting her calculator.
37.
37.
Yeah, so 37 years ago. So now.
And if I can say that number, starting to scare me a little bit, because then I came here for 3 months. I was going to just drop by.
Because I think you were chasing a little Southern Belle. Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, no, I met her in California, but she moved here, so I moved here, which the logic is impeccable. Oh, where are you going? Okay, I'll go too. Yeah, sounds good. And we had this whole idea. So I mean, you chase your girlfriend, then you marry her. So that part of the story worked out just fine.
Right.
And we both were like, well, yeah, whenever you move someplace, wherever it is, you're always a little homesick. We're going to move. So we will stay 3 months or the end of the year, the famous the end of the year, And looking back on it now, and I don't know how y'all feel about this, but it seems true that, so I was 26, and back then, 3 months was a long time. When you said, in 3 months, remind me later, that's too long. Or the end of the year, a number close to infinity. It seemed like, wow, by the end of the year. And all of a sudden, you get caught in the stream of things, and then 37 years go by.
Now, so she's not a Houstonian, right?
No. Well, she's a Californian. Don't tell anybody. Wait,
Right.
is this live?
Yeah.
Wait, can I have that back?
Yeah.
No, she was actually born in San Antonio, but she was just a kid. Her father was in the military. They were always kind of moving around in those years. But
Okay.
she saw herself as a California girl always.
Okay, so that was part of the reason why coming back this way to Texas.
Yeah, not really. Her sister married a Houstonian. She was close with her sister. So, one person, sort of always follows the
Mm.
next. It
Yeah,
seems, and there's
yeah.
that little trail of things. So how'd you get there? Oh, so and so called me. I said, hey, this is cool, and
Yeah.
you know.
Now, because a lot of people may not know, a lot of your fans know, but you actually didn't start out cooking. You actually have a PhD.
Yes,
You're actually
yeah.
you're actually a pretty smart guy.
Well,
I mean,
or lucky.
It's scary.
Yeah, or lucky, one or the other. No, I went. You know, my parents, they were that. You know, I always said, "You go into college. You go into college." I just said, "I'm going to college." I'm going to college. So I went to college, and I kind of liked it.
Yeah.
You know, and so it turns out that you can stay as long as you want. And when you get a PhD, they said you have to go now.
Oh,
You know,
okay.
you can't hang out here anymore.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
but I love science. I still kind of love the whole part of it. But I was just really intrigued by it, and I always.
Biochemist.
Biochemistry. And the interesting part was, and I kind of learned to cook at the same time,
Right.
which was what was interesting,
Mm.
and never really saw the two having anything to do with each other until slowly I said, hey, they have a lot to do with each other.
Yeah, sure.
But I think it just, if whether, I don't know what you call it, but I've always sort of seemed to get attached to things I was really fascinated with. Never thinking about, is this a good idea to be fascinated with this thing, or where are you going, and what are you doing, what's your plan? But I said, no, this is fascinating, So I think that was a lot of it. You just get latched onto something and want to understand it.
So, what was your first cooking job in Houston?
Well, no, in Houston, well, can I tell you what my first cooking job was?
Give us a rundown.
Now,
how
this
this all started.
Yeah, this is the best part that I didn't know it was a cooking job at the time, but I was, it's one of those things, you think, hey, nice, I was 16 and got a job at Baskin Robbins. Yeah, so, and I realized it was food service. It didn't occur to me it was food service at the time. Many years later, I said, oh, that was food service, People come in, they order things, you sort of do it. And it was great. And I think...
And where was that, though?
That was in California,
California.
in Burlingame, where I was a kid. So I went, it was a high school job, and then mostly a high school job, I guess. And good one for me because I happen to like ice cream, And I was really skinny, so I could eat ice cream for breakfast, lunch. Yeah, well, I try, not like back then where you had to like eat ice cream just to stay alive, But it was, it was good, and I sort of, but in a strange way, I ended up running the store. Like, I just said, let me do that. Let me, scheduling, let me do it. Yeah, let me try to do that, So anyway, I just sort of started there. I didn't know it was food service at the time, but the interesting thing about it, if you want, so I don't know how, I always want to know this now that I'm older, or way older, or whatever, you always think back and think, why didn't I think this back then? It just occurs you could have thought about it back then. So these, it's 31 flavors. So, and why are there 31? Actually, there were more than that. Why not just have one or two? I don't know. We had a bunch of them, And people would, so the long and short of it, it never really occurred to me the meaning of having your favorite flavor, and what an emotional sort of
Connection.
stress point that was for certain people. But because I wasn't, people were nuts about, the mint chocolate ice cream, whatever. And I said, nothing in nature is that color green. That was my one summation, I was saying. And I thought it was the weirdest. People were nuts about it. And I thought, the Rocky Road was kind of killer, and Jamocha almond fudge was sort of killer. And so, I'll have a chocolate mint. I said, why would you want to do that? Have a Jamocha almond fudge. That's what's killer. Right. So anyway, then there were people would come in. Remember they still have the little pink spoons, right? So they would come in. You'd seen them before, right? And they always order Jamocha almond fudge. But can I try this one and that? They tried 3 or 4, and then they'd order the Jamocha almond fudge, And I said, I never understood what that meant, sort of like, why go through this ritual and go back to the same thing all the time? But I guess they were just wanted to kind of branch out. But you see that scene in restaurants all the time now. This, they ask the waiter about all these menu items, and they order the same thing they always order, So I never really kind of fully intuited that. So what is a favorite flavor anyway, and how does it become your favorite flavor? There must be something, do that. But it was good. I probably worked there for a year, maybe a little longer. It seemed like 10. You know, one of those when you're sort of young. But it was. But I never saw it as a food service job until years later.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. But so then you went to college and became a biochemist, and then you met your wife. Well, you got married. Well, you came to Houston for 3 months.
Yeah, I got married in 80. Uh-oh, careful on this
Yeah.
one. I got married in 82.
So now you once you got married, you stayed in Houston. Is that right?
Yeah, so we came and, and one thing leads to another always. So, and you don't know the one thing is leading to the other when you're actually doing it. It's later you look back and say, oh, that was sort of why. So we got married in 82, and she was working with her sister and brother-in-law, Candy and Lonnie Schiller, in their advertising marketing agency. And then the general manager, well, this is a funny story, so, and you can imagine this from Mimi, right? She always sort of, was saying, you guys aren't doing it right, that kind of piece. You should do this, you should do that. So the general manager sort of left to go back to the hotel business. And she said, oh, wow, so what are you going to do? I said, I already know. I already have the general manager. And she said, who's that? I said, it's you. So, and then she said, what? I said, yeah. She said, now you get to do all those things you thought we're not doing it right,
Wow.
And she was right about, most of it. She sort of changed the front of the house style, particularly when it was, it was just the ending of the coat and tie era coat, that whole thing, which, like right now in July, you would think, yeah, I'm putting on a coat and tie to go out. It's still 95 degrees out,
Yeah.
And the whole idea that you would walk in and you had a reservation and they would take you to a table and this is it, And she would sort of ask people, oh, would you prefer to sit here or sit there, And people were like, I have a choice? I said, well, yeah, you do have a choice if you be more comfortable there,
Yeah.
And the whole theory was that food or wine never tastes good when you're pissed off. I
Right.
think that's the theory in a
Right.
way. So why start off badly, So, and that was kind of fun. The old time waiters didn't get it. No, you take control of the customer. You tell them to sit where they're going to sit. You look down at them, that kind of thing. So she was all warm, open-hearted and stuff. It was kind of cool.
And what were you doing during that time?
I was back in the kitchen the whole time. So we worked together. We never saw each other the whole day, whole night. She
What was
always
your
with
first
me.
cooking job?
It was at the restaurant. Yeah, I mean, I had
At this restaurant here? that you
in
talked-
Cafe Annie. Yeah, first time I'd ever cooked in a restaurant. But I had.
What?
Yeah, what?
Come on, man.
So let me tell you something about having a PhD. You get really good at bluffing where you don't know.
Kind of like this
what-
podcast.
yeah.
We started. I'm gonna figure out what to name it later.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. We know exactly what we're doing, and they can't see us winking, can they? Or a sense of panic. But so let me back up. So my mother was a very good cook. So in our house, it was a great era. It was like, do whatever you want, but don't be late for dinner. I mean, that was you had to be home for dinner for sure. And there were no cell phones, no nothing. It was like, if you wanted, go tell your brother to come to dinner, and he's outside. You just yell out the door.
Yeah,
that
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
thing, text him. Dinner's ready.
Right.
So we always had the sort of the family meal. It was always really great. And I was always fascinated by how it was done. I said, man, how do you do that? Because I figured if you could do it yourself, then you could make it for yourself. You didn't have to ask anybody. So my first dish, which I'm still very fond of, pancakes. I learned to make pancakes. I was probably 4, 5, 6 years old.
Mine too.
Yeah, pancakes like, wow, this is cool. So I became sort of the household sort of breakfast cook, making pancakes. And then so you got, when you get sort of inculcated into that culture of dinner, like the table was set, you'd sit down, we'd have a salad, and the food would sort of come, family style, and so forth. So it's like, oh, you don't eat from the stove, you sit down, and so forth. So, and then the food was really, really good, and so I got used to it, and then I found out how to make it. My grandma was also a great cook, so I was always one in the kitchen doing stuff. So I sort of saw how it, sort of worked, and so then I would cook little stuff along the way that I found sort of fascinating. Then when I moved so I lived at home when I went to the University of San Francisco, and it was interesting because I listened to the woes of my friends that lived in the dorm, like, oh, we're going to oh my God, I just want to eat something that's good. And I would go home, get there, my mother had just bake chocolate chip cookies or something, you know, and it was always really good. But then I moved away to graduate school, and at first I lived in an apartment by myself, and so I was suddenly now the principal and only cook, you know, and I just tried to emulate what I'd seen at home. This is going to come off as just real sort of, I don't know what the right word is, sort of pathetically sad or lonesome or something, but so when you're living by yourself, and it's just you at dinner, I just would set the table for myself. You know, it's kind of odd, you know. So, and so I just put I do everything just like I had it at home. But that was just kind of what do I do now? So yeah, so I'd do the whole thing, and then I'd kind of serve myself, you know, and it was, yeah, it's a bit country western in terms of the loneliness factor. I think, I don't know, but that's just how you sort of saw it. And then I would get recipes from my mother and from my grandmother, things I might remember. So, you know, when you're always part of the homesick thing, I think, is I want the food that I used to have or whatever. So I'd get in the mail, the old days, a little 3x5 card, you know, that would have everything sort of written out. And I would sort of do the stuff and sort of got into home economics of myself. So and so then I could boil water for sure. That was, you know. Then, and this is one of those strange fate things. So I met these two other graduate students that I became friends with. They said, hey, you know, we'd love to get a house instead of living in an apartment. So I said, oh, he said, you want to get a house together? I said, you know, when you're eating by yourself every night, you think, hey, this might be a good idea, you know. Someone to talk. Hard to have a conversation with yourself. You have to really kind of work on that, you know. Hey, let me ask myself a good question. Hey, good one. Yeah, let me think about that. Have you? So, but they said the one requirement, which was an requirement was that we had to have dinner together. It wasn't going to be a flop house sort of thing.
Isn't that
just
nice?
going to
Yeah.
come and go.
That's
And
cool.
I was like, you do whatever you want, just don't be late for dinner. So I thought, and that was really sort of like, wow.
Yeah.
You know, you want to, so I said, okay. And they said, we'll trade off cooking each night. So that way we'll just three rotations. Okay. So, and this is where every family, by the way, at that era had their own 3x5 cards, you know, and some of them were better 3x5 cards than others, you know.
Sure.
So they cooked the first 2 nights, and I remember it. It was great that so we had a sort of a meatloaf, and I just suggested that when there's more oatmeal in the meatloaf than meat, shouldn't we change the name? You know,
Oat loaf?
you know, something
Some
else.
oat loaf?
You know, at some point. And they didn't set the table. It was like everything's ready. You sort of went and sort of got it, and then sat down, which again I thought was sort of.
So you set the standard quickly.
So then I cooked the last day, and what I cooked, and this is again just one of those flukes that my grandmother and my mother too would do it. Would do this sort of roasted chicken, quartered up in a big, heavy, enameled cast iron roasting pan. You know, I think it was like yellow, right? It was like but it was really heavy duty. You know. And you put the chicken with these red onions and potatoes in it, and it would all. I didn't know this at the time, so I don't know how many years later, right? That it turns out that the roasting pan was just big enough that nothing steamed. So everything was just far enough apart where it didn't turn swampy. And the potatoes, and it had some enamel on the inside where potatoes get sort of crispy and the onions would get sort of caramelized. It's a pretty good dish, right?
Right.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I thought it was, and so it just worked, and I had no idea why it worked. It just worked, which is a good principle for cooking, that when it works, don't worry so much, just stick with it. It works, you know. Why does it work? I don't know, but it works. So I had learned to do that, so my mother then gave me that pan that said, I'm moving off to college, here you go, you know.
The magic
pan. And there was some magic to that. Yeah, right. How does it work? So the third night, I did the roasted chicken that I knew with the potatoes, you know, and I made a salad. And since you roasted the vegetables, I may have done some green beans or something, you know. And my mother also gave me, you remember Presto Pot? The steam, so they were pressure cookers, right?
Mhm.
And it must have been big back then, but so the top would latch on, and it had a little steam vent,
Okay.
and then you could put a steaming thing in the bottom, and it would build up pressure, and it had a little weighted
Yeah.
lid, right, that would go
Yeah.
on it, and it would rattle.
Yeah.
Scared the
Yeah.
is live radio? Scared the
Yeah,
whatever
yeah,
out of
yeah,
me,
sure.
because I always thought, so when does it blow up?
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
and the steam and stuff was like, wow. But you could like steam green beans in like 5 minutes. You know, like
Mm-hmm.
poof, they were like done and real sort of beautiful. So I probably did that. I set the table, put everything on the table, and then brought the chicken, put a hot pot in, and they were like, they thought, this is a restaurant at home. I mean, they were like completely blown away by the whole thing, And so I was like, yeah, do this all the time, So they in there, and they like to eat, and they had a good sense of taste. So in there, best described as euphoria, they said, or mistakenly said in their euphoria, why don't you cook and we'll clean up?
I knew
You
that was
know?
coming.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so I, of course, had early on learned the academic one of never jump on the answer too quick. Pause, think, well,
Yeah.
well, I'm not sure. Oh, please, oh, please. All right, I'll do it. So then I end up being the chief cook of the house.
Yeah,
and so then I would cook all these, because my 3x5 cars were just better, And the other one is my father was his parents were Italians, my grandparents were Italian, and the beverage was wine. Is what they drank at dinner. And I think you probably noticed at the time. I think they'd buy. I think it was probably something like Grignolino or something like that. And I think the alcohol, I didn't know, but the alcohol must have been low. And they would actually go to the winery in like Mountain View, California, and fill up these gallon things. And my grandfather would drink it like water, but it was probably 10% alcohol. It was probably really low, 9 or something. It wasn't like these days. So we always had wine with sort of dinner. So I sort of brought wine with dinner to this. I said, you've got to have wine with dinner, right? So and they were like, wow,
Yeah.
So then the whole thing started to sort of evolve, So then I became the chief cook. And when you're in graduate school, you're just maniacs about everything. So what do? You go to the library, you go to the bookstore. And so I'm like researching stuff. And then we got this reputation on campus. Oh, yeah, those guys. They live in that chateau on the other side of the campus. They're always having. So I'd learned, through those 5 years of graduate school, and a remarkable time, because let's say it's about 78, 79, all those French chefs, besides Bocuse, but the Trois Gros brothers, Michel Gerard, they all started publishing these Nouvelle Cuisine cookbooks. It was like, they were restaurant books is what they were, really, with photographs, color photographs. And so all of a sudden, it wasn't like you're reading Betty Crocker anymore. Good stuff, Betty Crocker. Then you could find some very stable good American things. So all of a sudden, I was doing more of this sort of restaurant cooking at home. No flour in the sauce. I had no idea what that really meant at the time, but I would whip a little butter. So I learned a lot before I came to Houston. So all I wanted to do was to work and just to see what the professional side was like. I was just sort of curious. So that's whether I could cook well or not was less important than I could read really well. So if there was, do you know how to do this? I'll be back tomorrow.
Right.
And I would,
So you and Mimi were working at a hotel first. Mimi was working at a hotel.
No. She was. She worked in marketing, advertising.
Marketing,
Yeah,
advertising.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So how did it
She
come?
liked to stay in hotels, by the way. She
All
loved
right.
that part.
And you were working. What was your first job in Houston? I'm trying to get to how did Cafe Annie come to?
Yeah. So Cafe Annie, Candy and Lonnie Schiller opened Cafe Annie, and I was there when it opened because I had visited Mimi. This is 1981 or very late 1980, and then I was going to come because Mimi was there. And the whole plan was we'll catch up and figure out. I was going to get a postdoc and figure where should that be. I had mentioned Chicago. She said, "You're going by yourself. Or you're going to Chicago." Then I said, "What about Switzerland?" She said, "Oh, that could be interesting." Just had to figure that sort of part out. But I knew some people in Houston at the Medical Center Baylor, so I had met some people there already. So there was a pseudo plan, plan becoming a plan in
Right.
in process of
An
being
id-
a plan.
idea of a
Yeah,
plan,
the
yeah.
idea of a plan. And I just said, so I was going to come. So we're going to figure that out. And then I said, could I just work at the restaurant if they needed, and they kind of needed a spare hand or something, and I could really, I'd love to do it. And I was 26 instead of, so that's how it kind of got started. So here,
Okay.
do this, here, do that. But Jacques Pepin, certainly, he had published, I just had lunch with him recently and asked him about this because I was piecing things back together. He had published those 2 books, La Méthode and La Technique, that were really sort of advanced. They were French cooking technique at a professional like restaurant level. So with pictures and stuff. And I read both of those books all the way through. And even he said that at first they were like, what kind of data is this? And it really sort of changed things. A lot of people have mentioned that all of a sudden, if you hadn't gone to a culinary school, which were probably very few in the 70s, I think, or just getting started, you could learn all these techniques. So how did Juliana carrot? You just looked it up, and there it was. So I had sort of, practiced those. And in science, you're very technique. As a graduate student, you're very technique driven. So I had enough skills I knew how to use a knife and stuff and so forth. And then, and being a quick learner, can help too. Ask a question, look, when I was in graduate school, they were saying if you didn't know something, you could do one of several things. One would be go to the library, look it up, do all the stuff, or just call somebody. Just call somebody who knows and ask them, how do you do this? And they'll just tell you.
So at what point did you become a partner?
Well, so then, it's now this is history, so everyone's going to have their own sort of version of it. But the chef there at the time was French, but a lot of people had come from France to Houston for some reason. I think it was sort of this. Well, I think in France, Texas is a pretty big, legendary thing. They had come, and I had sort of learned so that if you had a French accent, in Houston, your sort of stock price kind of went up, and so a lot of them that had been there for a while. I said, yeah, he's never lost his accent. Oh, he's not going to either, So it was a very prestigious thing to be associated with France. In fact, wine-wise, I remember that there was very little. California wine was just sort of starting, but Bordeaux was huge.
Yeah.
Everyone drank Bordeaux. Everything was very, 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 very French. Not so much Burgundy, but Bordeaux was a big, very big thing. So I think he had so that someone, I think a waiter had told me, a French waiter said, these guys were just a cook in France, and the next day they arrive in Houston, they're a chef. Because there was just one of those sort of things. But they had enough sort of skills. But I don't think the chef, he really loved wind sailing, as I remember, and he really didn't love the restaurant. He liked the idea of it, and it was good. But he really wanted to, not be there. And I was there. I was a graduate student, so I came from that environment where you went there in the morning, you went home late at night, you just stayed there the whole time. So I was there all the time doing stuff, and eventually he just didn't really care that much and wanted to do. And I think he had come from more of a charcuterie background where you had sort of that sort of storefront operation versus I don't want to say the word grueling, but the grueling schedule of a restaurant one.
Yeah.
So he sort of moved on, and then so we looked for another chef, and I at the time, since I was there all the time and had become this sort of you imagine it. Those kitchens at the time, where did you get the information? You learned it right or wrong from somebody else. And I was always coming in with a book, My reputation went, he's the cook with the book always. He always has the book. And let me show you this, let me show you this. And what was interesting, and I don't know what it was like in France, but in America, we seem to follow Nouvelle Cuisine very closely, And the guys from France didn't seem to know much about it. I was asking these questions about, they were like, no, I don't know that. Roger Frigé, no, I don't know who that is, But I guess it it'd be like me grew up in San Francisco. Oh my God, I love San Francisco. You must go to Fisherman's Wharf all the time. I said, no, we never go
Right,
there. We
right.
never pay attention to that. We just don't pay attention to them. So that was interesting that, I was talking about what the new stuff was happening and nobody else really cared. But the cooks that were there, they then sort of would always come to me with the question because I would always come back with the answer, either made up or.
Right.
And it just kind of, so then they said, well, you seem to be doing, and I was there all the time. And this is sort of hard to imagine, but like a day off, and who wants a day off?
Right.
No. If we have a day off, we'll go work anyways if we do. So then I just sort of took it over from there and just sort of, worked double time to learn as much as I could. And there are people I met in Houston, you just formed a community and, hey, do you know how to do this? And then friends, it's slowly and, acquired along the way, I guess.
But you like invented a style. Where'd that come from?
Tricky words, I think, either invented or discovered or uncovered or something, because sometimes you said, and the reason why I say that is, so we're all rolling along doing sort of, I guess, Nouvelle French cuisine is what we're trying to do, based on the, and I had said this before, that Nouvelle cuisine really opened the door for the new American cooking in a way, because it said, whatever you read the books, if it's just buy what's fresh in the market, use what you have sort of fresh on hand. So if the recipe says this with spinach, but the spinach is not any good, but the green beans are great, just do it with green beans. So it was a whole idea of, so when people sort of talk about, farm to market sort of stuff, I think, that was kind of Nouvelle cuisine was what was more close at hand, So we would then sort of adapt to sort of what you might be called a Nouvelle French / slightly Americanized, only because we were American. And I had never been to France in the first couple years, so I was just learning from picture books as it was kind of going along. So then I think we got pretty good at it. I mean, I think, we learned to make the sauces and all the various things. And I think, our taste slowly got better. When you don't know anything, you're not sure if it's good or not. But then at one point we realized that, or at least I realized, but I think there was a guy at the time, that regardless how good we could cook French food, the French would never say it was as good as French, because that's, that would violate their basic cultural principles, and there's no way that they could say it was better than French cooking. I mean, that would be impossible. Right. So I said, our only choice that's left, we can't be better than them, we can't be as good as them, we can only be second-rate position to them overall. And then that's supported by, we're not French anyway, so culturally we're always trying to mimic what we think. We're never quite sure if that's the right way to do it or not. So that was when we said, what's the one thing that we could do that we could call our own and say, this, no one can tell us that's not good, because we were going to reverse it, right? We're going to do it the other way around. So
that was a major epiphany. I mean, that was a major, what inspired, because that's a big statement right there, that you had that aha moment.
Yeah.
Because that's what, I think that's when you brought the notoriety, the fame to, and that's when Houston started waking up, like, wow, because you started that movement of the Texas cuisine, or the am I right? I mean,
yeah. So to be, I always try to be fair whenever I can, and all that means is you have to give as much credit to everyone else that was at the same time. So it was interesting that in Houston, what's the right? So you'll appreciate this story, and if you don't appreciate it, just act like you're appreciating the story. So when I first got to Houston, people would tell me, we're so, it's so great you're open on Mondays. And I said, oh yeah, sure, no, we're open Mondays. And yeah, because, the club's closed on Mondays, and various different people would tell me, well, the club's closed on Monday, so I'm glad you're open, And I kept asking people, so where is the club?
Yeah.
Yeah, and is it does everybody go to the club? Or I mean, I didn't know. I didn't
Can
grow
I go
up.
to the club?
Yeah. Well, so where is exactly the club, you know? And so then I came to realize there was really at the time sort of a country club cooking. I mean, there was sort of a style associated with it that, and I don't know it was a blending of things, but there was sort of that sort of food you would have at the club. And then there were other restaurants like sort of the Confederate House, I remember way back. These old Houston sort of styles, you know, I think. And so there was, I don't know if it was sort of a, you know, whether it was continental or not, or most, I guess continentals probably sort of gather the best dishes, but there was sort of the sense of restaurants had a little bit of clubbiness sort of to them, that they were sort of part of that. So, and there was a lot of crab meat on almost everything.
Right.
There was crab meat on everything, yeah. And so, so that was sort of the cuisine of the time. Then Nouvelle Cuisine sort of moved in, and it was at the end of the park was the Four Seasons, and they built La Reserve, and that was a major Nouvelle Cuisine piece. And then the Meridian was built downtown with Paul Bocuse as the consulting chef, big picture Paul Bocuse, and that was very Nouvelle Cuisine. And this was now, wow, this was the cutting edge. This was very, very sort of brand new. So that, I think, in a way, and so now, so the whole idea behind continental cuisine, and correct me if I'm completely wrong here, was that to qualify as continental cuisine, it had to be immediately recognizable as, I know that, you know, sort of duck with orange sauce. I mean, it wasn't like you'd see something on a continental cuisine menu that you'd never heard of before, because that would violate what the actual thing was. It was supposed to take these historic dishes from all around the world. So with Nouvelle Cuisine, it seemed like one of the subtle rules there was that you shouldn't be able to recognize anything on the menu, right? Because it's new, right? That was the whole idea. So you just take the continental out from the cuisine, and then you put, it's the new cuisine, which if it's new, you can't heard it before. So that, I think, sort of maybe, in retrospect, sort of changed a little the Houston attitude from seeing the menu and expecting everything that was going to be there versus these new combinations and new things they hadn't necessarily seen before. So that, I think, did a little something that said, okay, there can be new things. And I guess Nouvelle Cuisine came a little bit out of loosening up the stodginess of French cooking, which I guess that was sort of Paul Bocuse sort of thing in a way, that he was, that group was there at the beginning. We're all, you know, we're doing the same things. Light it up, fresh, light. Again, a little more market-driven and a little more regional and so forth. So that then was happening, and which was, again, liberating to us, because we could then, we're free to do a little more what we wanted to do. In fact, you know, this is, you want to hear an interesting story? Just a little sideline. Not a derailment of this conversation. So I was having lunch with Jacques Pepin. He's, you know, I've known him, I met him way, way back. A great, great guy. And we always went to him because he had worked in Paris in the 50s. And so we wanted to hear these stories. And he's a great raconteur, you know. We'd all sit around and he would just talk and we'd listen to these stories. He told us about Paris in the 50s and all these crazy stories that just are great. But one of them, so he worked at the Plaza Athénée. That was famous for their lobster soufflé, right? And he said, you know, the kitchen was big. Talk about a brigade. They had, he said, 24, 30 of us. I mean, he said, maybe we were doing 40 covers, but there were a million of us back there. But the whole hotel and so forth. So he said that they were famous, signature dish, the lobster soufflé. He said it didn't matter who made it in the kitchen. Anybody who made it, it always came out exactly the same. There was no imprint of the cook or the chef on it. There weren't 24 different variations depending who was going to sort of, you know, tweak it. It was exactly the same. You would never know who made it. And I said, wow. He said, yeah. He said, you know, and that was the thing at the time, that you were a little bit removed. Like, for you to put your little touch on it, your little personality was like, no. This is very, very strict. And then that sort of led to then all of a sudden Nouvelle Cuisine was about personality, that you could begin to recognize the chef by the style, which is a really important sort of switch that, like, oh, you mean, yes, I do the lobster soufflé this way. I always go there Tuesday nights, you know. when Jean-Marie is making the lobby. I love the way he does it. No, that wasn't allowed. So the Nouvelle Cuisine was all this sort of opening up. And that for us was, I think, interesting because we then all could have a personal sort of style as well. So that's, is a very subtle change, but sort of interesting. So now Houston is sort of open up to these sort of new things and new sort of style of eating and so forth. And then we could follow that path. And then we got to the point of saying that, we need something we can sort of call our own. And at that point in time, and this I remember clearly, that in the restaurant, and I think I'm not sure how much of this exists quite as much now, but then it was really clear that there was a dividing line between the cuisine that the staff ate in the kitchen and that was served in the dining room. There was, absolutely crystal. None of us in the kitchen ate anything we were serving in the dining room, right? So that was like, and why don't we eat anything French? Well, we're not really French. And it was us group, American kids, some Hispanic kids and so forth, that are melding together doing stuff, all really, young, and no one really long-term visions, pretty much short-term, everything's short-term. So we're having these,
family meals. Yeah,
family meals, and it's nothing French at all. And then all the French stuff got served in the front. So this is where it reaches the point, right? So we have rabbits. We get whole sort of rabbits. For me, it was good. I grew up on rabbit. My grandfather used to go hunting, so I was familiar with it. So, and we'd take the saddle and the legs, and those would be roasted for the dining room. And I think we even did it with like mustard sauce because we were supposed to, because that's what the book said, and we thought that must be very French. So we were doing it, and we'd even sliced the saddle because we saw it in the book, sliced, and so forth. We did all those sort of things, and then we'd have the shoulders, the front sort of left over, and so and I think I did it. So we would sort of trade off cooking. So I had braised the front end of the rabbits because that meat delicious, but you just
very
don't,
little meat.
you just don't bone it out. Like, let me get that. So slowly cooked it, and then and I had seen. I mean, I had always Mimi and I, when we were dating, we just ate Mexican food all the time. So I was kind of familiar with that part. So I braised the fronts of the rabbits and then pulled all the meat off. So I had this, and talk about making up as you're going along. It's like totally making up, So what's your plan for the next 5 minutes, 15, 30? 30 minutes? I don't know. But so then I had all the meat and the broth from the bones, and so I added chilies to it and sort of made this red chili pseudo mole-ish sort of thing at the time that I'd seen in some books. Made this sauce, had the meat. I said, well, we'll make enchiladas. So I rolled them up, made enchiladas with it, and that was what we all said ate. And everyone was saying, wow, this is killer. This is really, really, killer. So, way beyond chicken, yeah. So this was like killer. And I just sort of remember in the middle of a sudden, well, wait a minute, give it back. Wait a minute, what do you mean give it? So then this idea sort of comes like that. This is so good. I said, this is ridiculous that what we think is so good, we're not even serving. And wait a minute, does that really make any sense? Because we had this little, code was that quality control is really simple. Don't serve anything you wouldn't eat yourself, right? So it was like, be sure to taste everything, and So then it was, now what? Our favorite dish we don't even serve, and the fact that it was one end of the rabbit versus the other end of the rabbit. So then I said, let's give this a try, and I think I'd probably met Dean around then. So there was movement, and hey, we can do something on and American cuisine was growing, and that was all happening.
So Dean Faring, of course.
Yeah, Dean Faring, of course, and so then we decide to serve it. So we're still doing the saddle of rabbit. We're still doing that part with the mustard, very French, all carved out, a little Nouvelle Cuisine, sort of presentation, and so we're going to do as appetizer these rabbit enchiladas, and so we don't really sell any. At least the evening's going on, we don't sell any, And so I asked one of the waiters. I said, we're not selling these rabbit enchiladas. He said, yeah. I said, we tell the customers we have rabbit enchiladas tonight, and they all sort of laugh. They think we're joking,
Oh.
you know. So I said, oh, okay. Wait a minute. Are you telling me the food we like the best is a joke? Hey, wait a minute, you know. So I was either in one of those moments of thinking, you know, getting angry doesn't solve much. You have to more be inspired, right? So I said, I got an idea for you. I said, if you tell them the special is rabbit enchilada and they laugh, they get one free. We'll just send one out, you know. So, and they all thought, you know, that's ridiculous enough that this should kind of work. Sometimes you got to this is a ridiculous idea. Let's do it. I think we did a lot of things that way. Or maybe it's ridiculous in hindsight. Maybe, you know. Anyway, so all of a sudden, we're sold out. You know, condensed the whole story. So it went to like, oh my God. So then, and all it takes, I'm all for waiters, but if one table likes it, loves it, is ecstatic, all of a sudden, around the room, you know. So then what would happen was, because the shoulders don't have as much meat as the rest of it, we didn't make that many, so we would run out, and then people would call and reserve one. I want to reserve some rabbit enchiladas.
Wow.
And we could never sort of keep up. So at the same time, we have Southwest cooking and French cooking happening at the same time. And that's what you have to remember. It wasn't like, stop, we're not doing that anymore, and we're doing this. It was a little evolution of things. And then we had to start using the saddles and the legs to make more enchiladas. It was going the other direction. Everything was moving that sort of way. And that was probably the biggest sort of turning point to it, where all of a sudden, and what happens, I guess, is that the French piece is always a foreign one, and when people ate the enchiladas, this was like beyond Tex-Mex kind of chili sauce. So that's kind of how it all started. But it was a sequence of things, and then from there it was just a matter of and the reason why I would say invent versus discover is you go to some little Mexican restaurant and have a cool little dish, and you think, yeah, we used to borrow those ideas from the French. Now we'll borrow it from here, and then actually kind of going backwards, you know, looking at Mexican cooking and so forth. And so it was a matter of actually bringing old ideas back to life. As I say, invented or discovered, rediscovered, or something, combination of the two. But that's the
well,
whole
that's a
story.
pretty cool story. I mean, that's a lot of history right there. We just explained and where the Southwestern style came from. And I know Dean had a big part of it. We had Dean on the show a while back, and he talked about how you guys worked together and moved together with Stephen Piles, I think.
Stephen Piles, yeah.
Part of the
Yeah, it was not a solo act. It was
Yeah.
definitely a group, because then the idea was simple. If one of you does it, they could call you crazy. If there's a group of you, well, it could be a crazy group, or maybe they're onto something.
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
So it was also the right time.
Well, Chef, we're a little bit up against it here, but there's so much more. I mean, we're barely scratching the surface, but I mean, you had so many awards. I mean, that kind of started the whole thing in Houston, which is a great piece of history there. Also with Dean and Stephen Piles, the Tex-Mex / Southwest, and and then getting involved with, of course, the James Beard Awards, and of course, and then you were was on Julia Child's show on the PBS.
And she was great.
Yeah.
A good friend, and she was a marvelous part of the whole picture too. Very supportive and.
Well, in 30 seconds, what's your favorite Julia Child story?
Oh, my favorite Julia Child story. Here's one. So we had done the show. We're talking, and she asked me. She said, "You know, why is it that people are?" And so Julia first, very rigorous. The recipe had to be right as written. Everything was very, very, very rigorous, very scientific, very rigorous. You know, not. She said, "This is not for frou-frou cooks. You just don't throw things in. You know." And we have to be serious about this. So she says, I don't know why people, you know, don't cook more. Why don't more people cook? I said, yeah, Jill, they're just worried. They're just scared that it's not going to turn out, you know. Now, this is Julia Child saying this. She says, well, you know, she said, it never turns out so bad you can't eat it, you know. And that would be fine. And then she paused and said, and if it doesn't look good, put a little chopped egg on top. But I thought this was the Julia that was so rigorous about things, just said, oh, don't worry about it. Just put a little chopped egg on top.
Chopped
It'll be
egg was
fine."
her
Yeah,
secret.
Funny? Crazy. Yeah.
Well, I know Dean talks about when he almost killed her, when he gave her the...
Yeah, the wrong kind of famous.
Well, listen, I just want to kind of round out the show by saying, you know, your Food and Wine best restaurant in Houston a couple of times. best wine list, Christian, in Houston, America's Top Tables, gourmet, and several years, Chef of the Year, Culinary Award, Dorona, of course, Dorona recognizes Cafe Annie, and of course James Beard was one of the very first, if not the first, James Beard Award winner in Houston.
Yeah, the first one in Houston.
Yeah,
was
so
way back.
huge. Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course, our buddy Hugo now is carrying that torch.
Yeah, I would say when I won the James Beard Award, no one even knew what it was. You know,
Yeah.
It was, and we really started that whole program, Peter Kump and stuff. We needed something to be the center of the food community. So
Right. And so, but one last thing, and if we can do it quickly because we're so late, but what was the impetus for going from Cafe Annie to RDG and then RDG back to Cafe Annie?
Well, it's funny when we moved. It's pretty simple. So we'd started on Westheimer, and then we moved to Post Oak. And the restaurant, for some reason, the two spaces were the new one was bigger than the other one when we moved in 1989. But the same high ceilings, long box shape.
Yeah.
So the design, we could sort of duplicate it. It looked the same. So if you walked in the old Cafe Annie and the new Cafe Annie, it looked, you said, oh yeah, this is just sort of the old place sort of revamped. Then when the new space, because the building, the ceilings weren't as high, it was more square, it wasn't boxed shaped, and so on and on. Nothing would fit to sort of try to make it look the same as the old place. It just wouldn't work. So we had this sort of dilemma that if we called it Cafe Annie and you came to it, you would say, this is not it.
Right.
You know, it looks totally different. Everything was different about it. So I thought, oh, we'll just, we'll keep the Bar Annie part, and we'll just maybe, you always want to do something sort of new and so forth. And I was concerned, as you always have to be concerned about lifetimes of thing. Because a friend of mine then told me, he said, don't worry about it. It had its lifespan. Just keep the memories and do something else, which is always, you're always doing new stuff all the time, right? So then it came up on the 35th anniversary, and somebody said, you should have a big party. I said, you just feel bad the next day, then you should bring back some of the dishes and do it for a day. I said, that's hard for a day, for a week. And then it kind of sort of snowballed and said, eventually, why don't you kind of do a best of all those 35 years for a year or so? And then someone said, what if we change the name, sort of a little Brigadoon thing, come back? And I said, yeah, sure. And I said, well, we can't. So then they said, no, let's go back to it. And everyone, there was this huge, once I mentioned to people, I said, let me test this idea. They all went crazy. They said, oh, we'd love it to go back to that sort of name. I said, which people still called it anyway. It never really changed. Yeah. It was still, and we called it that. We'd answer the phone, Cafe Annie. I mean, because for so many sort of years. So in a nutshell, that was sort of it. And then I realized that people are really don't mess with their memories. They want to keep. I got engaged there. I had all these sort of things. That's I'm fine with it. It might be a nice way to sort of finish up that era anyway, just to kind of put a bracket on.
Well, brother, we're gonna go ahead.
If I could just. Am I on there?
Yeah.
If I could just recommend one thing, if you go to RDG on the first floor near the bathrooms, I always have a great time doing it, looking at all the, framed awards and articles, and every time I go there, I read something new. But it's kind of like it's a real big piece of history of Houston cuisine, and of course, it's a testament to how important you were for that. I've enjoyed listening to you. I wish we could have a second and third part to this, but do yourself a favor, go down there and look at that. It's a real big piece of history here in Houston.
Yeah,
you
cool.
might see me with longer hair, or a lot of it anyway.
Well, Robert, thank you so much for coming in and sharing some Houston history. That was really cool, and we'll for sure have you in again. And maybe next time we'll get you and Dean in here at the same time. You guys could play a little song or something.
Yeah, yeah. If you want trouble on the show, let's do that. That'd be plenty of trouble.
Well, thank you so much, and guys, appreciate y'all coming in studio. Phoenix Phil and the Bobbit.
Phil Phoenix.
Phil Phoenix.
Thank you.
Phil Phoenix, the Bobbit, and Flytrap. You're all good. But thanks for coming in, and Jay, thanks for getting us live streaming for the first time. Good job on that. And I appreciate y'all listening to today's show. Again, thanks again for Aceway and Dunkin' Coffee. You guys are awesome for supporting us. And everybody, if you enjoy the show, please go rave, rank, and review, and leave us some messages. Now we're going to start taking some calls here eventually in the future. So go tell a mother, brother, father, or friend, and we love you if you're doing that. So thanks again, Bob, at Phil, and Fly Drop, and always remember you're especially great and make an impact on someone's life today. See you next time.